she forced to marry a cold, older millionaire. What he did on their wedding night left her breathless. "Hi, my beautiful family. It's your Mr. Peter. Before anything else, let me speak a gentle prayer over you. As if I'm holding your hand through the screen, may today bring you softness where you've been hardened by life. May love show up in quiet ways, in a smile, a breeze, a memory. May your heart be lifted without reason, and may your soul breathe easier than it did yesterday. I pray your home is filled with warmth, your mind with peace, and your days with the kind of joy that doesn't shout, but quietly stays. You are loved more than you know, and never walking this life alone. Now, my sweet family, this story is close to my heart. Though I'm not the voice you'll hear today, every word came from me, written with the same love I've always poured into your lives. James, my brother, is here to bring it to life while I rest. But before we begin, can I ask you something gently? Are my introductions too long for you? I only speak like this because I love you deeply, and I want every video to feel like home, like someone truly sees you. To my beautiful first-time visitors, welcome to the family. Please stay till the end. Give James a full chance. Let the story settle in your heart. And if it doesn't feel right, you can always tell me. Your voice matters. And now, with all the love in my heart, please say a little prayer for me. No need for fancy words. Just lift my name with kindness. That's all I ask. And please, family, stay for the full story. Not because I need the view, but because this was written with you in mind. Every second, every breath. Like the video. Leave a warm comment. Let me feel you here, close and loving. You are not just my audience. You're my heart. Now take a deep breath. Let love lead you into this moment. And let James begin the story. A story made with tenderness and written just for you.
The sleek Aston Martin sliced through Chicago's downtown streets like a silver bullet, its engine purring with the confidence of its owner. Bernard Ellison gripped the steering wheel with the same intensity he brought to every board meeting, every merger, every decision that had built his billion-dollar empire. At 37, he was Chicago's youngest tech billionaire, feared in boardrooms and respected by competitors who secretly wished they could decode the ice-cold determination behind his steel-blue eyes. Tonight was no different. The Hartwell Industries acquisition had to close before midnight, or 6 months of negotiations would collapse. His lawyers waited at the downtown office, contracts spread across mahogany tables like battle plans. Bernard had built Ellison Medical Technologies from nothing after Victoria's death, channeling his grief into revolutionary medical devices that saved lives, the lives he couldn't save when it mattered most. The first snowflakes began falling as he turned onto Lakeshore Drive, but Bernard barely noticed. His mind was already in the conference room, calculating numbers, anticipating objections, preparing to demolish any obstacle between him and victory. He'd learned to compartmentalize everything, emotion, pain, hope, into neat boxes that never interfered with business. His phone buzzed with another urgent text from Richard Stone, his business partner. "Board getting restless. Need you here now." Bernard's jaw tightened. Richard had been pushing harder lately, questioning Bernard's decisions, suggesting he was taking unnecessary risks. Tonight would prove who really controlled this company. The blizzard hit without warning. One moment Bernard was cruising at 60, the next his world exploded into white chaos. The Aston Martin hydroplaned on black ice, spinning sideways across 3 lanes before slamming into the concrete barrier with a sickening crunch of metal and glass. The airbag deployed with explosive force, and then everything went black. Angela Morris pulled her scrubs tighter as she walked through the automatic doors of Chicago General Hospital's emergency department. The overnight shift was always unpredictable, but blizzard nights brought a special kind of chaos. Car accidents, heart attacks from shoveling snow, and hypothermia cases that tested every skill she'd learned in 8 years of nursing. At 29, Angela had seen enough trauma to fill several lifetimes, yet she still felt her heart race with each ambulance siren. Tonight would be her final week at the hospital before starting her new position with Elite Care Solutions, Chicago's most prestigious private nursing agency. The pay increase would allow David to finish law school debt-free while helping their mother finally stop working 2 jobs. "Morris," Dr. Rachel Patterson called out as the first ambulance screamed into the bay. "Major MVA incoming, multiple trauma, possible head injury, your primary." Angela's training engaged as she pulled on gloves and prepared the trauma bay. Through the rain-streaked windows, she could see paramedics working frantically around a stretcher. The patient was male, unconscious, expensive suit, torn and bloodied. Even injured, he possessed an unmistakable presence. Bernard Ellison, 37, driver in single-vehicle collision, the paramedic reported as they wheeled him in. Possible TBI, multiple rib fractures, compound fracture left tibia, vitals fluctuating, lost consciousness at scene. Angela's breath caught. Even in Chicago's medical community, everyone knew that name. Bernard Ellison, the ruthless billionaire who'd revolutionized medical technology after his fiancée's death in a malpractice case. She'd read about him in medical journals. His company's innovations had saved thousands of lives. But the man before her looked nothing like the intimidating figure from magazine covers. Blood matted his dark hair, his usually perfect features were pale and vulnerable, and his breathing was shallow and labored. In this moment, he wasn't a billionaire or a corporate titan. He was just another human being fighting for his life. "Talk to me, Angela," Dr. Patterson demanded as they transferred Bernard to the trauma table. BP dropping, pulse thready, pupils responsive but sluggish. Definite head trauma, possible internal bleeding. Angela's hands moved with practiced efficiency, establishing IV access while monitoring vital signs. "Sir, can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You're safe." For a moment, nothing. Then Bernard's eyes fluttered open, the most intense blue-gray she'd ever seen, unfocused but somehow still penetrating. His lips moved soundlessly. "Don't try to talk," Angela said softly, leaning closer. "You've been in an accident, but we're taking care of you." His eyes found hers and held, and for a brief instant she saw something that surprised her. Fear. Raw, human fear that had nothing to do with corporate power or billion-dollar deals. His hand moved slightly, and without thinking, Angela covered it with hers. "I'm Angela," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." The trauma bay exploded into controlled chaos as Dr. Patterson barked orders. X-rays, CT scans, blood work, the full diagnostic arsenal to determine the extent of Bernard's injuries. Angela coordinated it all while maintaining constant contact with her patient, talking him through each procedure even though he drifted in and out of consciousness. 3 hours later, the initial crisis had passed. Bernard's injuries were severe but not life-threatening. Significant concussion, 3 broken ribs, compound leg fracture, and extensive bruising. He'd need surgery on his leg and months of intensive rehabilitation. "He's stable," Dr. Patterson announced, pulling off her gloves. "Going to need significant recovery time, though. Head injuries like this. He's looking at months of cognitive rehabilitation, physical therapy, the works." Angela nodded, making notes in Bernard's chart. She dealt with similar cases before. Wealthy, powerful men who became impossible patients because they couldn't accept their temporary helplessness. She was already preparing herself for demands, tantrums, and entitled behavior. But as she checked his vitals one final time before transferring him to ICU, Bernard's eyes opened again. This time they were clearer, more focused. "Angela," he said, his voice hoarse but surprisingly gentle. That's That's a beautiful name. She blinked, taken off guard. How are you feeling, Mr. Ellison? Like I've been hit by a truck. He tried to smile, wincing at the effort. But alive. Thanks to you. I was just doing my job. No. His gaze held hers with startling intensity. It was more than that. I could hear your voice when everything else was dark. You kept me anchored. Angela felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was an unexpected quality in the way he looked at her, not with the entitled expectation she'd anticipated, but with genuine gratitude and something deeper that made her pulse quicken, despite her professional training. You're going to be fine, she said, her voice softer than she intended. But you'll need extensive care during recovery. Someone will contact your family about arrangements. No family, Bernard said quietly. Just business associates who see me as a profit margin. The sadness in his voice caught Angela off guard. Here was one of the world's most powerful men, and he was utterly alone. Before she could respond, his assistant burst into the ICU, a thin, nervous man with wire-rimmed glasses and an expensive suit. Mr. Ellison, thank God you're conscious. The Hartwell deal collapsed, the board is panicking, and Richard Stone is calling emergency meetings. We need to... Robert. Bernard's voice carried unmistakable authority despite his weakened state. I need private nursing care for my recovery. Contact the best agencies in Chicago and arrange interviews. Angela's heart skipped. Elite Care Solutions was exactly the type of agency that would handle such arrangements. Sir, are you sure about private nursing? Hospital care might be more. I want someone I can trust, Bernard interrupted, his eyes finding Angela's again. Someone who understands that healing requires more than medical expertise. As Robert scurried away, making phone calls, Angela found herself staring at Bernard Ellison with new understanding. The ruthless billionaire facade was cracking, revealing glimpses of a man carrying wounds that went far deeper than tonight's accident. She had no idea that in 48 hours she'd be professionally assigned to his care, living in his penthouse, and caring for a man whose vulnerability would shatter every preconception she'd ever had about love, wealth, and the courage it takes to heal a broken heart. The storm outside was just beginning. Chapter 2. The Reluctant Patient. 2 days after Bernard's accident, Angela stood outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his lakeshore penthouse, watching Lake Michigan stretch endlessly toward the horizon. The space was breathtaking, minimalist luxury with clean lines, expensive art, and not a single personal touch that revealed anything about the man who lived here. It felt more like a high-end hotel than a home. Elite Care Solutions had assigned her to Bernard's case after an extensive interview process. The agency's director had been clear. This was their most high-profile client, requiring discretion, professionalism, and tolerance for difficult behavior. Angela's hospital experience with trauma patients made her the ideal candidate. This is unacceptable. Bernard's voice carried from the master bedroom, sharp with frustration despite his weakened condition. I don't care what the doctor said. I need those quarterly reports today. Angela checked her watch. She'd been Bernard's private nurse for exactly 18 hours, and he'd already fired 2 physical therapists, dismissed a meal delivery service, and reduced his assistant Robert to near tears. The agency had warned her that corporate executives could be challenging patients, but Bernard Ellison was operating on an entirely different level of stubborn. She entered his bedroom carrying a lunch tray, taking in the chaos surrounding his king-sized bed. Laptops, legal documents, and financial reports covered every surface. Bernard sat propped against silk pillows, his left leg elevated in a cast, his face pale but his eyes blazing with determination as he barked orders into his phone. Richard, I don't care if the projections show a minor dip. The Hartwell acquisition still makes strategic sense, and I want it back on the table by... He noticed Angela and held up one finger, as if she were another employee waiting for orders. Angela set down the tray and calmly walked over to his bedside table, where 3 different phones were charging. Without a word, she unplugged all of them. "I'll call you back," Bernard said into his phone, his expression darkening as he watched her. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "My job," Angela replied evenly, gathering the scattered documents. "Which is ensuring your recovery, not enabling your self-destruction. Those reports are crucial to—" "Your blood pressure spiking to dangerous levels," Angela interrupted, checking the monitor beside his bed. 160/95. Your body is trying to heal from significant trauma, and you're flooding it with stress hormones. Bernard's jaw tightened. "I don't have the luxury of lying around feeling sorry for myself. My company needs—" "Your company needs you alive and functional, not driving yourself into a stroke." Angela moved to the windows, pulling the blackout curtains partially closed. "You have a severe concussion, Mr. Ellison. Overstimulation and stress can cause permanent cognitive damage." "Don't patronize me," Bernard snapped. "I built a billion-dollar empire. I think I can manage my own recovery." Angela turned to face him, her brown eyes steady and unflinching. "How? By working 18-hour days from a hospital bed? By ignoring medical advice? By treating everyone around you like they're obstacles to your productivity?" The silence that followed was electric. Bernard wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by employees. But Angela's quiet confidence, the way she held her ground without backing down, intrigued him despite his frustration. "You don't understand," he said finally, his voice quieter but no less intense. "Richard Stone has been my business partner for 5 years. He's brilliant, ambitious, and he's been waiting for an opportunity like this. Every minute I'm not working, he's positioning himself to take control of my company." "So you'd rather work yourself to death than appear human?" The question hit like a physical blow. Bernard stared at her, this beautiful, fierce woman who'd just stripped away his defenses with surgical precision. In the subdued lighting, her skin seemed to glow, and he found himself noticing details that had nothing to do with business. The way her full lips pressed together when she was determined, how her scrubs couldn't hide the curves beneath, the compassion in her eyes even when she was being tough. "It's not that simple," he said, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Isn't it?" Angela sat in the chair beside his bed, close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume, something warm and floral that made him think of spring gardens instead of sterile boardrooms. "When was the last time you took a day off? A real day where you didn't think about work at all?" Bernard opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He honestly couldn't remember. "Before Victoria died," he admitted quietly. Angela's expression softened. She'd researched his background after accepting the assignment, the tragic malpractice case that had apparently driven Bernard to revolutionize medical technology. But seeing the pain still etched in his features made it real in a way news articles never could. "Tell me about her," Angela said gently. "Why?" Bernard's walls went back up instantly. "So you can psychoanalyze me? Determine what's driving my self-destructive behavior." "Because," Angela said, surprising him with her honesty, "you're not just my patient. You're a man who's been carrying pain alone for too long, and I think talking about her might help." Her voice carried genuine caring without pity, and it made Bernard's defenses crumble. He leaned back against the pillows, his gaze focusing on a point beyond the windows. "Victoria was everything I wasn't," he began slowly. "Warm, spontaneous, optimistic. She believed in second chances, in the goodness of people. She wanted to travel the world, have children, build something meaningful together. What happened? Routine surgery, gallbladder removal, completely standard procedure. But the surgeon was intoxicated." Bernard's voice turned bitter. Victoria hemorrhaged on the table. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. Angela's hand moved instinctively toward his, then stopped. "I'm so sorry." The surgeon lost his license, faced criminal charges, but Victoria was still gone. Bernard's eyes found Angela's, and she saw the depth of his pain. I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense anymore. Building medical devices that could prevent what happened to her, that gave me purpose. And now I don't know how to exist any other way. His admission was barely above a whisper. If I stop moving, stop building, stop fighting, what's left? Angela leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. Life, Bernard. Actual life, not just survival. The way she said his name, not Mr. Ellison, not Sir, just Bernard, sent an unexpected jolt through him. When was the last time someone had spoken to him like a person instead of a title? I lost my father when I was 16, Angela continued. Construction accident. One day he was teaching me to change a tire, the next he was gone. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat, and I took care of my brother David while finishing high school. "I'm sorry," Bernard said, meaning it. "I thought I had to be strong for everyone, had to fix everything, had to never show weakness. Sound familiar?" Angela's small smile held understanding. "It took me years to realize that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring what we've lost by choosing to live fully." Bernard stared at her, this remarkable woman who'd somehow seen through all his defenses to the broken man underneath. The late afternoon light filtered through the curtains, creating a golden halo around her dark hair, and he felt something he hadn't experienced in 4 years, genuine desire. Not just physical, though the attraction was undeniable, but emotional hunger for connection with someone who understood. "You're not what I expected," he said softly. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would enable my self-destruction for a paycheck." His intense gaze held hers. "Instead, I got someone who actually gives a damn." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and the kind of tension that had nothing to do with medical care. Angela felt her pulse quicken under his focused attention, her professional boundaries wavering in the face of unexpected attraction. A sharp knock interrupted them. Richard Stone strode into the bedroom without waiting for permission, his silver hair perfectly styled and his expensive suit immaculate. He looked like Central Casting's version of a corporate shark. "Bernard, we need to talk immediately. The Hartwell situation requires your personal attention, and the board meeting is tomorrow." "Richard," Bernard's voice carried warning, "I'm in the middle of recovery, yes, but business can't wait." Richard's calculating eyes dismissed Angela entirely. "Perhaps your nurse could give us some privacy." Angela stood, recognizing the power play, but also seeing the way Bernard's vitals spiked on the monitor. "Actually, Mr. Stone, my patient needs rest. Perhaps you could schedule an appointment through proper channels." Richard's smile was sharp as a blade. "I don't think you understand who you're speaking to, Miss Morris. And I understand perfectly." Angela's voice remained calm but firm. "I understand that my patient's health takes priority over business meetings." The tension in the room was palpable as Richard sized up Angela, clearly trying to determine if she was a threat or simply an obstacle to remove. Bernard watched the exchange with growing interest, impressed despite himself by Angela's unwavering composure. "It's fine, Angela," Bernard said finally. "Give us 10 minutes." As Angela left the room, she heard Richard's voice drop to urgent whispers about board member concerns, competitive threats, and the need for immediate action. Whatever he was discussing, it was making Bernard's blood pressure climb again. She checked her watch and decided that 10 minutes was about all her patient could handle. When she returned, Richard was gone, and Bernard looked drained. "Productive meeting?" she asked, noting his elevated vitals. Richard thinks I'm losing my edge, says the board is questioning my judgment. Bernard closed his eyes. Maybe he's right. Or maybe, Angela said, straightening his pillows with gentle hands, you're finally finding it. As she moved around him, Bernard caught her wrist gently, his thumb tracing over her pulse point. The simple touch sent heat racing through both of them. Thank you, he said quietly, for caring enough to fight me. Angela looked down at his hand on her wrist, at the vulnerability in his expression, and felt her heart skip. This was dangerous territory. Caring for a patient was one thing, but feeling this level of attraction was another entirely. But as Bernard's thumb continued its gentle caress and his penetrating gaze held hers with growing intensity, Angela realized it might already be too late to maintain a professional distance. The storm outside had ended, but the one building between them was just beginning. Chapter 3. Crossing Professional Lines. 6 weeks into Bernard's recovery, his penthouse had transformed from a sterile showcase into a warmer, more livable space. Angela had quietly introduced small changes: fresh flowers on the kitchen island, warm blankets draped over the leather furniture, and the subtle scent of home-cooked meals, replacing the antiseptic smell of medical equipment. Bernard noticed every detail, though he pretended not to. He found himself looking forward to Angela's presence more than his healing body required, watching the way sunlight caught the gold highlights in her dark hair, how her laugh could fill the vast space with warmth he hadn't felt in years. Ready for physical therapy? Angela asked, entering his bedroom with professional cheer that didn't quite hide the tension that had been building between them. Bernard looked up from his laptop. She'd negotiated limited work time as his concussion symptoms improved, and felt the familiar jolt of awareness that struck him every time she walked into a room. Today she wore fitted black leggings and a soft burgundy top that accentuated every curve while remaining completely appropriate. Somehow that made her even more desirable. "Do I have a choice?" he asked, closing the laptop with obvious reluctance. "Not if you want to walk without permanent complications." Angela moved to his bedside, her hands already reaching to help him stand. "Come on, let's see how that leg is feeling today." The moment her hands touched him, Bernard felt electricity shoot through his system. 6 weeks of physical therapy meant 6 weeks of Angela's gentle touches, her hands guiding his movements, supporting his weight, helping him relearn basic functions his body had forgotten. It was professional torture of the most exquisite kind. Angela felt it too, the way his muscles tensed under her touch, how his breathing changed when she stood close, the way his blue-gray eyes tracked her every movement with increasing intensity. She'd worked with dozens of attractive patients before, but none had ever made her forget her professional boundaries, quite like Bernard Ellison. "Let's start with range of motion," she said, helping him stand beside the parallel bars they'd installed in his spacious living room. The Chicago skyline stretched beyond the windows, but neither of them was paying attention to the view. Bernard gripped the bars, his jaw tight with concentration and pain as he attempted the exercises. His left leg, still healing from the compound fracture, trembled with the effort of bearing weight. Angela stood close behind him, her hands ready to catch him if he faltered. "Good," she murmured, her voice low and encouraging. "Now, try taking a step." Bernard attempted to move forward, but his leg buckled slightly. Angela's arms went around him instantly, her body pressing against his back as she steadied him. For a moment they froze, both acutely aware of every point of contact, her chest against his shoulder blades, her hands spread across his torso, his heart pounding against her palm. "Okay?" Angela breathed, not moving away despite every professional instinct screaming at her to maintain distance. "More than okay." Bernard's voice was rough with more than exertion. She helped him back to sitting position but stayed close, ostensibly checking his vitals. Her fingers found his pulse at his wrist, and Bernard watched her face as she concentrated, memorizing the way her lower lip caught between her teeth when she focused. Heart rate elevated, she observed quietly. Wonder why? Bernard replied, his gaze never leaving her face. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and want. Angela's professional training warred with the desire coursing through her veins. She should step back, maintain boundaries, remember why she was here. Instead, she found herself leaning closer. "Bernard," she began, not sure if she was warning him or herself. "I know," he said softly. "I know this complicates everything, but I can't stop thinking about you, Angela. About this." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. Angela's eyes fluttered closed at the touch, her resolve crumbling like sand. "We can't," she whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. "You're my patient. I could lose my license, my career." "Then tell me to stop," Bernard said, his thumb moving to trace her lower lip. "Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll never touch you again." Angela opened her eyes, meeting his intense stare. The smart thing, the professional thing, would be to lie, to step back and rebuild the walls between them. But looking into Bernard's eyes, seeing the vulnerability beneath the desire, the way he was offering her his heart along with his want, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Before she could respond, the elevator chimed, announcing a visitor. Angela sprang back from Bernard like she'd been burned, her cheeks flushing as she smoothed down her top. "That's probably David," she said, grateful for the interruption despite the frustrated desire still humming through her body. "I mentioned he might stop by today." Bernard nodded, though his expression remained dark with want. "I'd like to meet him." David Morris was 25 years old and shared his sister's warm brown eyes and stubborn determination. Where Angela was curved and feminine, David was tall and lean, his expensive suit marking him as someone who understood the world Bernard inhabited. "Mr. Ellison," David said formally, extending his hand as Angela made introductions. "I've read about your work in medical technology, impressive innovations." "Thank you." Bernard shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "Angela tells me you're in law school." "Harvard Law, actually. 3rd year." David's voice carried pride but also caution as he studied the man his sister was caring for. "Specializing in corporate law." "Harvard. Excellent choice." Bernard settled back in his chair, curious about this young man who clearly meant everything to Angela. "What draws you to corporate law?" "Control," David answered honestly. "Growing up, we never had it. Landlords, bill collectors, employers, everyone else made decisions that affected our lives. I decided early that I wanted to be the one with the power to protect my family." Bernard respected the honesty. "And what do you think of your sister working for me?" David's gaze sharpened. "I think my sister is the best nurse in Chicago, and you're fortunate to have her care. I also think you're a man used to getting what you want, and I hope you understand that Angela isn't for sale." The protective edge in David's voice might have offended another wealthy man, but Bernard found himself approving. "Your sister is remarkable," he said simply. "And you're right. She deserves someone who values her for more than what she can do for him." David's expression shifted as he heard genuine respect in Bernard's tone. This wasn't the entitled billionaire he'd expected. This was a man who looked at Angela like she was precious, irreplaceable. "Angela's always taken care of everyone else," David said carefully. "Made sure I had everything I needed for school, that Mom had help with bills. She deserves someone who'll take care of her for a change." "David," Angela warned, embarrassed by the direction of conversation. "It's fine," Bernard said, his eyes finding hers. "He's looking out for you. I respect that." Over lunch, Bernard listened as the siblings shared stories of their childhood, their struggles, their dreams for the future. He watched Angela's face light up when she talked about David's achievements, saw the deep love between them that transcended blood, and spoke to chosen family. "You should see the clinic where Angela volunteers," David told Bernard. "Free health care for families who can't afford insurance. She works full days here, then goes there on weekends to help people who have nothing." Bernard's attention focused on Angela across the table. "You never mentioned that." Angela shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "It's not important. It's everything," Bernard said quietly, and the intensity in his voice made her breath catch. After David left, the penthouse felt different, more intimate somehow, as if David's visit had given Bernard permission to see Angela as more than just his nurse. She was cleaning up the lunch dishes when she felt him behind her. "Let me help," he said, reaching around her for plates, his chest brushing her back. Angela froze, hyper-aware of his proximity, his warmth, the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "You should rest your leg." "I'm tired of resting." Bernard's hands came to rest on the counter on either side of her, effectively trapping her against the sink. "I'm tired of pretending I don't want you." Angela's pulse hammered as she turned to face him. They were inches apart now, his eyes dark with desire and tenderness, the vulnerable expression of a man who'd forgotten how to want anything beyond revenge and success. "Bernard," she whispered, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palms. "I know this is complicated," he said, his voice rough with want. "I know I'm risking everything by feeling this way about you, but I can't help it, Angela. You've brought light into a life I thought was permanently dark." "We can't," she said, but her hands were fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer instead of pushing him away. "Can't what? Feel something real? Want something beyond duty and obligation?" Bernard's hands came up to frame her face. "You're not just my nurse, Angela. You're the woman who's teaching me how to live again." The kiss, when it finally came, was inevitable, soft at first, tentative, like a question neither was sure they should ask. But the moment their lips touched, something ignited between them. Bernard's arms came around her, pulling her flush against him as the kiss deepened, became desperate, hungry. Angela melted into him, her professional boundaries dissolving under the heat of his mouth, the strength of his arms, the way he kissed her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. She'd never been kissed like this, like she was precious, essential, wanted beyond reason. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together as they tried to process what had just happened. "We're in trouble," Angela whispered. Bernard's thumb traced her swollen lower lip. "The best kind of trouble." As evening fell over Chicago, neither of them mentioned the kiss again, but everything had changed. The way Bernard watched her move through his space, the way Angela's touch lingered during medical checks, the electricity that sparked every time they accidentally brushed against each other. They'd crossed a line there was no going back from, and both of them knew it. The question now wasn't whether they wanted each other, it was whether they were brave enough to fight for something that could cost them everything, or strong enough to walk away from the kind of love that came once in a lifetime. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered like diamonds against velvet, beautiful and unforgiving. But inside Bernard's penthouse, two people who'd built walls around their hearts were finally ready to tear them down. Chapter 4: When Business Becomes Personal. The morning after their kiss, Angela woke in the guest bedroom of Bernard's penthouse with her heart racing and her professional ethics in complete chaos. She'd spent the night replaying every moment, the way Bernard had looked at her like she was precious, how his hands had trembled slightly when he touched her face, the desperate hunger in his kiss that matched her own. She had to get control of this situation, had to find a way to maintain professional boundaries while living in the same space as a man who made her forget every rule she'd ever lived by. Their relationship had deepened over the following weeks, But complications arose when Richard Stone accelerated his campaign to undermine Bernard's leadership. Elite Care Solutions had extended Angela's contract indefinitely, a decision that pleased Bernard but concerned Angela as it blurred the lines between her professional and personal involvement. "Good morning," Bernard said softly when she entered the kitchen, his voice still rough with sleep. He sat at the island with his laptop and coffee, looking devastatingly handsome in dark pajama pants and a white t-shirt. His hair was mussed from sleep, and when he looked up at her, Angela felt her resolve waver. "Morning. How's your pain level today?" Angela busied herself pouring coffee, hyper-aware of his gaze tracking her every movement. "Manageable." Bernard's response was carefully neutral, but the undercurrent of tension was impossible to miss. "Angela, about last night." "Was unprofessional," she interrupted quickly, not looking at him. "We both know that. You're my patient, I'm your nurse, and what happened can't happen again." The silence that followed was deafening. When Angela finally risked a glance at Bernard, his expression was unreadable. "Is that what you really want?" he asked quietly. Before Angela could answer, the elevator chimed. Richard Stone emerged with the confidence of a man who owned the space, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. He carried a leather briefcase and wore the expression of someone preparing for battle. "Bernard, we have a situation," Richard announced without preamble, then noticed Angela. His pale blue eyes assessed her with practiced calculation. "Perhaps we could have some privacy." "Angela stays," Bernard said firmly, his protective instincts flaring at Richard's dismissive tone. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of her." Richard's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. Over the past weeks, he'd been building his case against Bernard's leadership, and Angela's presence was becoming a useful weapon. "Very well. The board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. There are serious concerns about your fitness to lead, given your current condition and recent decisions." "What recent decisions?" Bernard's voice carried warning. "Your insistence on pursuing the Hartwell acquisition despite changed market conditions. Your refusal to consider the Medicorp merger that could increase profits by 40%. Your general unavailability during a critical growth period." Richard's gaze flicked meaningfully toward Angela. "Some board members question whether your judgment has been compromised by personal circumstances." Angela felt heat rise in her cheeks. She didn't need Richard to spell out his implication. "My judgment is fine," Bernard said with dangerous quiet. "My decisions are based on long-term strategic vision, not quarterly panic." Nevertheless, the board wants assurances. James Morrison has been particularly vocal about your extended absence and irregular decision-making patterns. Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages with theatrical efficiency. "There's also been talk about your living arrangements and whether they represent appropriate professional boundaries." The threat was subtle but clear. Richard had done his research and was prepared to use Angela's presence as evidence of Bernard's compromised state. "Set up the video conference for this afternoon," Bernard ordered coldly. "I'll address the board's concerns directly." "Bernard, you're in no condition to—" "I'm in perfect condition to remind the board who built this company," Bernard interrupted, his voice sharp as steel, "and who has the vision to keep it growing." After Richard left, the penthouse felt charged with toxic energy. Angela watched Bernard pace as much as his healing leg would allow, his face dark with fury and something deeper, betrayal. "He's been planning this for months," Bernard said finally, "using my recovery as an excuse to position himself for a takeover, and now he's using you as ammunition." "Maybe I should leave," Angela said quietly. "If my presence here is causing problems for you." "You're not the problem," Bernard said fiercely, turning to face her. "Richard is the problem. He's ambitious, manipulative, and he's seen my accident as an opportunity to seize control." Before Angela could respond, the elevator chimed again. This time, the visitors made Bernard go completely still. Elizabeth and William Ashworth stepped into the penthouse with the authority of people accustomed to controlling every room they entered. Victoria's parents were exactly what Angela had expected, wealthy, elegant, and radiating the kind of cold power that came from generations of privilege. Elizabeth was perfectly preserved at 62, her silver hair in an elegant chignon, her black Chanel suit making a statement about both wealth and perpetual mourning. William looked distinguished and ruthless, his pale eyes immediately cataloguing everything in the room. "Bernard," Elizabeth said, her voice arctic despite the facade of concern. "We heard about your accident. How unfortunate." "Elizabeth, William." Bernard's tone was carefully controlled. "What brings you here?" "Concern for your welfare, naturally." William's calculating gaze took in the medical equipment, Bernard's casual clothes, and finally settled on Angela with obvious disapproval. "Though it seems you've made a remarkable recovery." Elizabeth's attention followed her husband's to Angela, and her expression grew subtly disdainful. "How thoughtful of you to hire such dedicated nursing care." The racism in her tone was refined but unmistakable. Angela felt her spine straighten, her chin lift with quiet dignity that came from years of dealing with such prejudice. "Angela Morris," she said, extending her hand with professional courtesy. "I'm Bernard's private nurse through Elite Care Solutions." Elizabeth's handshake was brief and cold. "I'm sure you're very skilled at your profession." The implication hung in the air like poison. Bernard stepped closer to Angela, his jaw tight with anger. "Angela is the finest nurse in Chicago," he said with icy precision. "Her care has been exemplary." "I'm sure it has," William said with false warmth that was somehow more threatening than open hostility. "Bernard, we need to discuss some family matters. Perhaps your nurse could give us privacy." "Actually, I should check on my other duties," Angela said quickly, recognizing the power play and not wanting to make things worse for Bernard. As she left the room, she heard Elizabeth's voice drop to a conversational whisper that somehow felt more dangerous than shouting. In the guest bedroom, Angela tried to focus on updating Bernard's medical charts, but she couldn't stop thinking about the Ashworths' obvious hostility. She'd dealt with racism before. Subtle looks, condescending comments, the assumption that she was somehow less qualified because of her skin color. But Elizabeth Ashworth's disdain felt particularly venomous, sharpened by grief and entitlement. 40 minutes later, raised voices from the living room made Angela emerge from her room. The Ashworths were clearly arguing with Bernard, their voices carrying despite their attempts at discretion. Completely inappropriate relationship that dishonors Victoria's memory. "Your judgment has obviously been compromised by your injury and this woman's influence. Responsibility to the company Victoria would have helped you build." Bernard's voice cut through their arguments like a blade. "Victoria is dead. She's been dead for 4 years, and I've mourned her appropriately. But I won't live in a mausoleum forever." "Is that what you call this?" Elizabeth's voice rose sharply. "Carrying on with your nurse while pretending to honor our daughter." "I'm not pretending anything," Bernard replied with cold fury, "and my personal life is none of your concern." "Everything about you is our concern," William replied with quiet menace. "Victoria made you our son in everything but law. We've supported your company, your vision, your recovery from tragedy. But this is unacceptable." Angela pressed herself against the wall, not wanting to eavesdrop but unable to return to her room without walking past the living area. "We know about Richard Stone's concerns regarding your leadership," Elizabeth continued with surgical precision. "About the board's doubts concerning your fitness to lead. We've also learned about the questions surrounding your current living arrangements and professional relationships." The threat was clear: abandon Angela or face a coordinated attack on his leadership. "You're threatening me?" Bernard's voice was dangerously quiet. "We're protecting our daughter's legacy," William said with cold authority. "The company, the foundation, the future she would have wanted for you. This inappropriate relationship jeopardizes all of it." Angela had heard enough. She couldn't stay hidden while people discussed her like she was a problem to be solved. Taking a deep breath, she walked into the living room with professional dignity intact. "Excuse me," she said politely, her mask firmly in place. "I need to check Mr. Ellison's vitals." The Ashworths turned to look at her with barely concealed hostility. Elizabeth's eyes swept over Angela with obvious disdain. "How convenient," Elizabeth said with icy precision. "Bernard, I think you should know that we've made some inquiries about Ms. Morris's background and professional history." Angela felt the blood drain from her face. "I beg your pardon?" "It's quite illuminating." William stepped forward, his pale eyes fixed on Angela with predatory focus. "A nurse from a working-class background, significant student loans, family financial pressures. One might wonder about the motivations for accepting such an extended private assignment." The accusation was clear without being stated directly. Angela felt humiliated, furious, and heartbroken all at once. "Are you questioning my professional integrity?" Angela asked with quiet dignity. "We're questioning everyone's motivations," Elizabeth replied smoothly, "including yours and Bernard's judgment in this situation." She turned back to Bernard with renewed authority. "We're prepared to make you an offer, Bernard. End this inappropriate relationship, refocus on your recovery and the company, and we'll support you against Richard Stone's challenges. Continue down this path, and you'll face opposition from every direction." The ultimatum hung in the air like a death sentence. Angela watched Bernard's face cycle through anger, pain, and something that looked dangerously like consideration. "I need to think about this," Bernard said finally, his voice carefully neutral. Angela felt her heart shatter. After everything they'd shared, everything they'd felt, he was actually considering their demands. "Of course," William said with satisfaction. "We'll give you 24 hours to make the right decision." After the Ashworths left, the penthouse felt like a tomb. Angela stood in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she processed what had just happened. "Angela," Bernard said quietly, approaching her carefully. "Don't," she said, not turning around. "Just don't." "They're threatening everything I've built," Bernard said, his voice thick with conflict. "The company, the foundation, the medical research that could save thousands of lives." "I understand," Angela replied, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I understand that I'm not worth sacrificing your empire for." "That's not what I said. It's what you implied." Angela finally turned to face him, seeing the tortured expression on his face. "And maybe they're right. Maybe I'm just a nurse who got in over her head." "You're the woman I love," Bernard said desperately. "Am I?" Angela asked with quiet dignity. "Because the man I love wouldn't need 24 hours to choose between me and the approval of people who've never shown him genuine affection." She walked past him toward her room, her heart breaking with every step. "Where are you going?" Bernard called after her. "To pack," Angela replied without looking back. "I think it's time for me to complete my assignment and move on." As Angela closed her bedroom door, she heard Bernard sink onto the sofa with a sound of anguish that nearly broke her resolve. But she couldn't stay in a relationship where she was constantly fighting for her place, constantly proving her worth, constantly being seen as an obstacle to overcome rather than a partner to cherish. The war for Bernard's future had begun in earnest, and Angela refused to be collateral damage. Chapter 5. Fighting the Past. Angela spent the night in her room, systematically packing her belongings while trying to ignore the sound of Bernard pacing the living room. She'd called Elite Care Solutions to request a new assignment, but the director insisted she complete her current contract. Bernard had apparently paid for another month of care, non-refundable. Professional obligation trapped her in a situation her heart couldn't endure. Every instinct told her to flee before she lost herself completely to a man who would always choose his empire over her love. At dawn, she emerged to find Bernard still awake, sitting on the sofa with his laptop surrounded by financial documents and legal briefs. He looked haggard, older somehow, as if the night had aged him years. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, her nurse training overriding her personal pain. "Couldn't." Bernard's voice was hoarse with exhaustion. "I've been thinking about what the Ashworths said, about the board meeting today, about Richard's plans." Angela moved to the kitchen, needing the routine of making coffee to keep her hands steady. "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That I've been fighting the wrong battle," Bernard said quietly. "I've been trying to prove I'm the same man I was before the accident, when maybe the problem is that I am the same man, obsessed with control, terrified of vulnerability, choosing power over people." Angela paused in her coffee preparation, hearing something new in his voice. "The Ashworths want me to choose between you and everything I've built," Bernard continued. "But what they don't understand is that everything I built was just an elaborate monument to my own pain. It wasn't living, it was existing." He stood carefully, his legs still stiff from the night of pacing, and moved toward her. "I spent 4 years building walls so high that nothing could hurt me again. Then you walked into my life and showed me that those walls weren't protecting me. They were suffocating me." "Bernard, I'm not choosing them," he interrupted firmly. "I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us, whatever the cost." Angela felt her heart skip, but years of protecting herself made her cautious. "What about your company, your foundation, all the lives your work could save?" "Will still matter," Bernard said, reaching for her hands. "But not more than the life I could build with you, not more than the love you've given me." Before Angela could respond, Bernard's phone rang. Robert's name flashed on the screen. "Sir, I've discovered something about Richard Stone that you need to see immediately." Robert's voice was tight with excitement and fear. "Can you meet me at the office and bring your legal team?" An hour later, they sat in Bernard's office conference room while Robert laid out a devastating trail of evidence. Financial records, email communications, and bank statements painted a picture of systematic corporate betrayal. "Richard has been embezzling company funds for 18 months, Robert explained, his voice shaking slightly. "But it's more sophisticated than simple theft. He's been manipulating project budgets, inflating vendor costs, and skimming the difference into offshore accounts." Angela watched Bernard process the information with the cold focus that had made him legendary in business circles. This was the billionaire the world knew, analytical, ruthless, completely in control. "How much?" Bernard asked quietly. "Approximately $8 million, Robert replied. "But the intellectual property theft is potentially worth 10 times that amount. He's been selling our research data to competitors, sabotaging our patent applications, and deliberately undermining projects that would increase company value." Bernard's expression grew darker with each revelation. "Why?" "Best guess?" "He needed money fast to cover gambling debts and bad investments. Then when you had the accident, he saw an opportunity to position himself as the responsible, alternative leadership. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Richard hadn't just been ambitious. He'd been desperate, using Bernard's recovery as cover for increasingly bold theft and sabotage. "There's more," Robert continued hesitantly. "I found communications between Richard and the Ashworths. They've been coordinating their attacks on your leadership. Richard provided them with information about your relationship with Angela, and they've been feeding him intelligence about board member concerns. Angela felt sick. The Ashworth family hadn't just been protecting Victoria's memory, they'd been actively collaborating with a criminal to destroy Bernard's life. "We need to call an emergency board meeting," Bernard said finally. "Today, before Richard can do any more damage." "Sir, are you sure you're ready for that kind of confrontation?" Robert asked. "The stress, your recovery—" "I'm ready," Bernard replied with steel in his voice, "and this time I'm not fighting alone." He turned to Angela, his expression intense but no longer tortured. "Will you stand with me? Not as my nurse, but as the woman I love." Angela looked at this man who'd chosen her over his safe, controlled world, who was prepared to fight for their future regardless of the cost. Always. The emergency board meeting convened at 2 o'clock via secure video conference. 12 board members appeared on screen, their faces reflecting confusion and concern. Richard Stone sat at the conference table with Bernard and Angela, his confident facade beginning to crack as he realized something had changed. "Board members," Bernard began, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Thank you for joining this emergency session. We're here to address serious criminal activity that threatens the foundation of this company." He laid out the evidence with methodical precision: financial records showing Richard's embezzlement, communications proving intellectual property theft, and documentation of deliberate sabotage of company projects. Richard's face went from confident to pale to desperate as the scope of his exposure became clear. "This is preposterous," Richard sputtered. "Bernard's clearly not thinking rationally. His head injury, his inappropriate relationship with his nurse—" "My relationship with Angela has nothing to do with your crimes," Bernard interrupted coldly. "Though I understand you've been using it as a distraction from your theft." Bernard clicked to the next slide, showing communications between Richard and the Ashworths. "You've also been collaborating with outside parties to undermine my leadership while stealing from the company that trusted you." The board members' expressions shifted from confusion to anger as they processed the scope of Richard's betrayal. James Morrison, the most powerful board member, leaned forward with cold fury. "Richard, is this true? I was protecting this company from Bernard's compromised judgment," Richard said desperately. "His accident affected his cognitive function, his decision-making ability." "My cognitive function is fine," Bernard said with quiet authority, "as evidenced by my ability to uncover your criminal activity and present it to this board." The vote to remove Richard Stone was unanimous. Within minutes, security was escorting him from the building, while corporate lawyers began criminal proceedings. "I want to address the concerns about my leadership directly," Bernard continued after Richard's departure. "Some of you have questioned my judgment, my priorities, and my relationship with Angela Morris." Angela tensed, but Bernard's voice remained steady and sure. "Angela isn't just my nurse. She's the woman who saved my life in every way possible. Her presence in my life has made me a better leader, not a compromised one. She's reminded me that this company exists to improve lives, not just generate profits." He outlined his vision for restructuring the company around affordable medical technology, for expanding their charitable initiatives, for using their success to create positive change in the world. "I'm not asking you to approve of my personal life," Bernard concluded. "I'm asking you to judge my leadership based on results, vision, and the long-term value I create for this company and the people we serve." When the vote was called, Bernard's leadership was reaffirmed by an overwhelming margin. Only one board member abstained, and none voted against him. After the meeting ended, Angela and Bernard sat in his office as the late afternoon sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. "So," Angela said softly, "you really chose me." "I chose us," Bernard corrected, pulling her into his arms. I chose the future we could build together over the past I've been hiding behind. What about the Ashworths? They won't give up easily. Let them try, Bernard said with quiet confidence. They have no power over me anymore. No leverage, no guilt, no hold on my future. That evening, they returned to the penthouse as partners in every sense. The medical equipment was finally gone, replaced by signs of their shared life. Angela's books on the shelves, photos of their time together, evidence of a relationship that had grown from professional necessity into genuine love. I have something for you, Bernard said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Angela's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a stunning sapphire and diamond ring, not flashy or ostentatious, but elegant and timeless. This isn't about replacing what we lost or proving anything to anyone else, Bernard said, taking her hand. This is about the future we're going to build together, the love that's already changed both our lives. Bernard, marry me, Angela. Not because of pressure or convenience or crisis, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you've shown me that real strength comes from vulnerability, real success comes from connection, and real love is worth fighting for. Angela looked at this man who'd grown from a broken patient into her greatest love, who'd chosen their future over his past, who'd proven that love could indeed conquer fear. Yes, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I'll marry you. As Bernard slipped the ring onto her finger, Angela realized they'd won more than a corporate battle. They'd won the right to build a life based on love instead of obligation, partnership instead of power, hope instead of fear. The hardest part was over. Now they could focus on the beautiful beginning ahead of them. But first they had one more challenge to face. News that would arrive in just 2 weeks. News that would test their newfound happiness in ways they couldn't imagine. Angela's mother was about to need them in ways that would change everything once again. Chapter 6. Love's True Test. 2 weeks after Bernard's proposal, Angela received the call that shattered their newfound peace. She was in Bernard's study, planning their engagement party while he worked on the company's charitable restructuring, when her phone rang with her mother's number. "Angela, sweetheart." Carmen Morris's voice was strained, trying to sound casual despite obvious distress. "I need to tell you something. I'm at the hospital." Angela's blood turned cold. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I collapsed at work yesterday. Thought it was just exhaustion, but the doctors want to run some tests." Carmen's voice wavered slightly. "They found some abnormalities. Dr. Patterson wants to do a biopsy." The word biopsy hit Angela like a physical blow. She sank into the nearest chair, her hand trembling as she gripped the phone. "I'll be there in 2 hours," Angela said immediately. "Don't make any decisions until I arrive." After ending the call, Angela sat in stunned silence. Bernard looked up from his laptop, immediately noting her ashen complexion. "What's wrong?" he asked, moving to her side. "My mother. They think she might have cancer." The words felt surreal, leaving Angela's lips. Without hesitation, Bernard closed his laptop and reached for his jacket. "I'll drive you to Baltimore." During the 3-hour drive to Johns Hopkins Hospital, Angela stared out the window while Bernard handled logistics, calling his pilot to put the jet on standby, contacting the best oncologists in the country, preparing for whatever they might face. "You don't have to do this," Angela said quietly. "It's not your responsibility." "Your family is my family now," Bernard replied simply. "We face this together." At the hospital, they found Carmen in a private room that Bernard had quietly arranged, looking smaller than her 55 years but maintaining the dignity that had carried her family through years of hardship. "You must be Bernard," Carmen said warmly, despite her circumstances. "Thank you for bringing my daughter here so quickly." "Mrs. Morris," Bernard said gently, taking her hand. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." Dr. Patricia Chen, Carmen's oncologist, arrived with test results that confirmed their worst fears. Aggressive pancreatic cancer, stage 3, with spread to nearby lymph nodes. With traditional treatment, chemotherapy, and radiation, we're looking at extending quality of life rather than cure, Dr. Chen explained gently. The prognosis is 12 to 18 months. Angela felt the world tilt beneath her feet. 12 to 18 months wasn't enough time. They just found happiness, just gotten engaged, just started planning a future together. "Are there other options?" Bernard asked immediately. "There's an experimental treatment program here at Hopkins," Dr. Chen replied. "A combination of targeted immunotherapy and precision radiation that's shown promising results in early trials. But it's extremely expensive, approximately $400,000 for the full protocol, and not covered by insurance." Angela's heart sank. Even with her increased income from Elite Care Solutions, that kind of money was impossible. Her mother's insurance would cover basic treatment, but not experimental procedures. "What are the success rates for the experimental treatment?" Bernard asked. "Promising, but not guaranteed. We're seeing extended life expectancy of 3 to 5 years in 60% of patients, with a 20% chance of full remission." "We'll take it," Bernard said immediately. "Bernard, no." Angela turned to him with wide eyes. "You can't—" "Dr. Chen, what do we need to do to get Mrs. Morris into the program?" Bernard continued as if Angela hadn't spoken. "I'd need to make some calls, but given her condition and our current enrollment, we could probably arrange admission within the week. However, the financial arrangements would need to be confirmed." "That won't be a problem," Bernard interrupted. "I'll have my assistant contact your billing department today." After Dr. Chen left to begin the enrollment process, Angela turned on Bernard with a mixture of gratitude and fury. "You can't pay for my mother's treatment," she said, her voice shaking. $400,000, Bernard. That's not just money. That's a commitment, an obligation that changes everything between us." "It changes nothing," Bernard said firmly, "except that your mother gets to live." "But what if we don't work out? What if you decide I'm not worth the investment? What if—" "Stop." Bernard's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle but his voice absolute. "Do you really think I would ever use your mother's life as leverage against you? Do you think that little of the man you agreed to marry?" Angela's eyes filled with tears. "I think you're wonderful. Too wonderful. And I'm terrified of owing you something I can never repay." "You already gave me something I can never repay," Bernard said softly. "You gave me back my life, my capacity to love, my future. $400,000 is nothing compared to that." "It's not nothing to me," Angela protested. "It's more money than my family will make in a decade. It's what I want to do for the woman I love and the mother who raised her," Bernard interrupted. "Angela, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me use it for something that matters." Carmen had been listening to their exchange with growing concern. "I don't want to cause problems between you two," she said quietly. "If this treatment is causing conflict—" "It's not," Bernard said firmly, never taking his eyes off Angela. "There's no conflict here. Just fear, and fear makes us say things we don't mean." Angela looked between her mother, the woman who'd sacrificed everything to raise her children, and Bernard, the man who was willing to sacrifice everything to save them. The weight of accepting such generosity felt overwhelming. "I can't just take your money," Angela said desperately. "Then marry me," Bernard replied. "Tomorrow, today. Right now, if possible." Angela's breath caught. "What?" "Marry me today," Bernard repeated, his voice steady and sure. "Not in 6 months with a big ceremony and perfect planning. Marry me now in this hospital, with your mother as our witness." "Bernard, that's crazy." "It's practical," he corrected. "If we're married, then your mother's treatment isn't charity. It's family taking care of family. If we're married, then everything I have is yours too, and you never have to feel indebted." Angela stared at him. This extraordinary man who was offering to rearrange his entire life to ease her fears. "You want to get married in a hospital?" "I want to marry you wherever you'll have me," Bernard said simply. "But yes, I think it's perfect. We met in a hospital. You saved my life in a hospital. Now we can promise to save each other in a hospital." Carmen was crying openly, moved by the depth of Bernard's love for her daughter. "Sweetheart," she said to Angela, "this man isn't asking you to marry him because of my illness. He's asking you to marry him despite it. He's choosing to take on a sick mother-in-law when he could run away from the complications. But our engagement party, our plans, can still happen," Bernard said. "We'll have the celebration later with all our friends and the perfect dress and flowers. But right now, today, I want to make you my wife so that there's never any question about where I stand or what you mean to me." Angela looked at Bernard, this man who'd gone from patient to lover to fiancé to her greatest champion in the space of 6 months. He was willing to marry her in a hospital room to ease her fears about accepting help. He was willing to spend a fortune on experimental treatment for a woman he'd just met. He was willing to bind himself to her permanently in the face of medical crisis and family complexity. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes, let's get married today." 3 hours later, they stood in the hospital chapel with Carmen in a wheelchair as their witness. Angela wore the dress she'd traveled in, a simple navy wrap dress that Bernard told her made her look beautiful. Bernard wore his business suit minus the tie, his hair still mussed from running his hands through it during Carmen's admission process. The chaplain was an elderly man who'd married hundreds of couples in similar circumstances, love tested by crisis, commitment forged in the fire of emergency. "Do you, Bernard, take Angela to be your wife, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, in joy and sorrow?" "I do," Bernard said, his voice strong and sure. "I take her with all my heart, all my love, and all my future." "Do you, Angela, take Bernard to be your husband, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, in joy and sorrow?" Angela looked into Bernard's intense gaze and saw everything she needed: love, commitment, partnership, hope. "I do," she said through tears. "I take him completely, gratefully, forever." They exchanged the sapphire engagement ring for a simple platinum band that Bernard had bought in the hospital gift shop. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was tender and full of promise for whatever storms they'd weather together. "Congratulations, Mrs. Ellison," Bernard murmured against her lips. "Thank you, Mr. Ellison," Angela replied, marveling at how right her new name sounded. That evening, while Carmen began pre-treatment preparation, Angela and Bernard checked into a nearby hotel as husband and wife. Their wedding night was quiet, tender, full of soft touches and whispered promises. "Any regrets?" Bernard asked as they lay together in the darkness, Angela's head on his chest. "Only that my father couldn't walk me down the aisle," Angela said softly. "But he would have loved you. He would have been so grateful that someone loves me enough to take care of our family." "I don't feel like I'm taking care of your family," Bernard said, his arms tightening around her. "I feel like I'm finally gaining the family I've always wanted." 3 days later, Carmen began the experimental treatment that would save her life. Bernard sat with Angela through every appointment, held her hand during scary moments, and somehow made the sterile treatment rooms feel less frightening with his quiet presence. "You know," Carmen said to Angela during one of her infusion sessions, I spent years worrying about who would take care of you after I'm gone. I never imagined someone would love you enough to take care of me, too." Angela squeezed her mother's hand while watching Bernard coordinate with her medical team, his business skills applied to ensuring she received the best possible care. She'd married a man who proved that love wasn't just about grand gestures or passionate moments. Love was about showing up, fighting for each other, and choosing to build something beautiful even when the foundation felt uncertain. They were married now, committed to facing whatever came next as partners. Angela no longer felt like she was accepting charity. She felt like she was part of a team that would do anything to protect the people they loved. The treatment would work, though they wouldn't know that for weeks. What mattered now was that they'd proven their love could survive the test of crisis, that their commitment was strong enough to weather any storm. As newlyweds facing their first major challenge together, they'd passed with flying colors. Chapter 7, Redemption and Revelation. 6 weeks after their hospital wedding, Carmen Morris was responding remarkably well to the experimental treatment. Her oncologist, Dr. Chen, had cautiously upgraded her prognosis from extended quality of life to possible remission, as tumors shrank and blood work improved beyond their most optimistic projections. Angela and Bernard had settled into married life with surprising ease, splitting time between Chicago and Baltimore while managing both his company's charitable restructuring and her mother's care. Their relationship had deepened through shared crisis, proving that their love could survive real-world pressures beyond corporate intrigue and family interference. But their peace was shattered when William Ashworth filed a lawsuit that threatened everything they'd built together. "A conservatorship petition?" Angela asked in disbelief, reading the legal documents that had been delivered to their penthouse. "He's claiming you're mentally incompetent." Bernard's face was grim as he reviewed the extensive filing. "William's arguing that my head injury caused permanent cognitive impairment and that my recent decisions, marrying you, funding your mother's treatment, restructuring the company, prove I'm no longer capable of managing my affairs." The lawsuit was comprehensive and vicious. William Ashworth had assembled an expensive legal team to argue that Bernard's personality changes since the accident, his relationship with Angela, his shift toward charitable work, his reduced focus on profit maximization, demonstrated he was no longer mentally competent to control his fortune. "They want him declared your conservator," Angela said, her voice tight with fury. "He'd have complete control over your money, your business decisions, even your personal life, including the authority to annul our marriage," Bernard added darkly. "William's arguing that I lacked the mental capacity to consent to marriage." Angela felt sick. After everything they'd survived, after proving their love through crisis and commitment, William Ashworth was trying to destroy their relationship through legal manipulation. "Can he actually do this?" she asked. "With the right judge and enough medical testimony about brain injury effects?" "Possibly," Bernard admitted. "Brain injury cases are complex, and personality changes can be interpreted as cognitive impairment if you have skilled lawyers making the argument." The next few weeks became a nightmare of legal preparation and psychological evaluation. William's lawyers demanded extensive neurological testing, psychiatric assessments, and cognitive evaluations designed to find any evidence of mental impairment. "This is humiliating," Angela said, after watching Bernard endure his third psychological evaluation in 2 weeks. The testing treated him like a specimen rather than a brilliant man who'd built an empire. "It's strategic," Bernard replied wearily. "They're hoping the process itself will make me appear unstable. Death by 1,000 cuts." The media attention was brutal. Headlines questioned whether the billionaire's breakdown proved he was mentally unfit, and whether his marriage to his former nurse was evidence of compromised judgment. Paparazzi followed Angela to her mother's treatments, turning every hospital visit into a public spectacle. "Maybe I should disappear for a while," Angela suggested, after a particularly vicious article described her as a gold-digging opportunist who exploited a brain-injured patient. If our marriage is being used as evidence against you, you're not going anywhere, Bernard said fiercely. If anything, you're the proof that my judgment has never been better. You've made me happier, more focused, more successful than I've ever been. The breakthrough in their legal defense came from an unexpected source. David, now working as a junior associate at a prestigious law firm, spent his evenings researching William Ashworth's legal and financial history. "I found something," David announced, arriving at the penthouse late one night with a stack of documents. "William Ashworth has done this before, multiple times." "What do you mean?" Bernard asked, looking up from his own legal preparations. In 1998, he petitioned to have his own father declared incompetent after the old man donated significant family wealth to environmental causes, David explained. The case was dismissed, but not before destroying his father's reputation and health. The man died 6 months later, reportedly from stress-related complications. Angela felt cold understanding wash over her. He's using the same strategy. Exactly. And in 2005, he attempted to gain conservatorship over his sister when she married someone he disapproved of, a jazz musician from New Orleans. The pattern is clear. William Ashworth uses competency challenges to control family members who make decisions he doesn't like. Armed with this information, Bernard's legal team shifted strategy. Instead of just defending his competency, they went on the offensive, painting William as a manipulative man with a history of using the courts to control others. The competency hearing was scheduled for a cold March morning in Cook County Court. Angela sat in the gallery, her hands clenched in her lap, watching the man she loved fight for his fundamental right to make his own choices. William Ashworth's lawyers presented their case with polished efficiency. They called neurologists who testified about potential long-term effects of traumatic brain injury. They presented business analysts who questioned Bernard's recent charitable focus. They brought in a psychiatrist who suggested Bernard's marriage to his former nurse showed impaired judgment regarding appropriate relationships. Angela wanted to scream at every insinuation, every suggestion that loving her was proof of mental instability. But Bernard's defense was masterful. His lawyers called colleagues who testified to his continued brilliance in business matters. They presented financial analysts showing that his charitable initiatives had actually increased company value and employee satisfaction. They brought character witnesses who spoke to his clear thinking and sound judgment. Dr. Patricia Williams, the neurologist who'd overseen Bernard's recovery, delivered particularly powerful testimony. "Mr. Ellison's cognitive function has returned to baseline levels," she testified. "His decision-making capacity, memory, and judgment all test within normal ranges." The personality changes described by the petitioner, increased empathy, greater focus on relationships, expanded charitable interests, aren't signs of brain damage. They're signs of emotional growth and recovery from grief. When Bernard took the stand, he spoke with quiet dignity about his recovery, his marriage, and his vision for using his wealth to create positive change. "Your Honor," he said, "I've been accused of having impaired judgment because I fell in love with my nurse and chose to use my wealth to help others. If those are signs of mental incompetence, then I'm proud to be incompetent." He spoke eloquently about Angela's character, about the experimental treatment that was saving Carmen's life, about his decision to restructure his company around affordable medical technology. "I loved Victoria Ashworth deeply," Bernard continued, his voice steady despite the emotion. "Her death nearly destroyed me, and I spent 4 years living in an emotional wasteland. Angela didn't damage my judgment. She restored it. She reminded me that life is about more than accumulating wealth and power." When Angela was called to testify, she spoke honestly about their relationship, their professional beginnings, and their personal growth. I fell in love with Bernard's heart, not his bank account, she said simply. Everything we've built together has been based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Our marriage wasn't the result of impaired judgment. It was the result of two people choosing to build something beautiful together. David's research proved crucial when Bernard's lawyers presented evidence of William's pattern of using competency challenges to control family members. The pattern was damning, showing a man who weaponized the legal system against anyone who defied his wishes. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. The court finds no evidence that Mr. Ellison lacks the mental capacity to manage his affairs, Judge Harrison announced. The petitioner has failed to prove that falling in love, engaging in charitable work, or making business decisions based on personal values constitutes mental incompetence. This appears to be an attempt to control Mr. Ellison's choices rather than protect his welfare. The ruling went further, ordering William Ashworth to pay Bernard's legal costs and issuing a restraining order preventing future frivolous competency challenges. Outside the courthouse, Bernard pulled Angela into his arms, both of them crying with relief and exhaustion. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. "William Ashworth has played his last card and lost. We're free to build our life without interference." That evening, they celebrated quietly with Carmen, David, and their closest friends. Carmen looked radiant and healthy, her treatment progressing so well that Dr. Chen had begun discussing remission timelines. David had been offered a permanent position with Bernard's legal department after his brilliant research work. "I have an announcement," Bernard said, raising his champagne glass. "Angela and I have decided to establish the Victoria Ashworth Foundation for Medical Innovation, a division of our company dedicated to developing and distributing life-saving medical devices at cost to communities that can't afford traditional health care." The room fell silent as everyone processed the significance of naming the foundation after Victoria. "You're honoring her memory," Carmen said softly, tears in her eyes. "Victoria would have loved the idea of using medical technology to help people who need it most," Bernard replied. "And it feels right to ensure her legacy is about saving lives, not controlling them." Elizabeth Ashworth had attended the court hearing, sitting in the back row with the expression Angela couldn't read. Afterward, she'd approached them outside the courthouse. "I owe you both an apology," Elizabeth had said quietly. "William and we were so afraid of losing Victoria's memory that we tried to preserve it by controlling yours. But watching you together, seeing how you've honored her memory through your charitable work, I realize we were wrong." She'd turned to Angela directly. "My behavior toward you was inexcusable. Victoria would be ashamed of how I treated the woman who brought happiness back to Bernard's life." The conversation had been brief but meaningful, suggesting that perhaps not all of Victoria's family was determined to destroy their happiness. 3 months later, Bernard and Angela hosted their official wedding reception at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Carmen was officially in remission, glowing with health as she danced with her new son-in-law. David gave a toast about his sister finding a man worthy of her strength and compassion. Elizabeth Ashworth attended, bringing a beautiful crystal vase that had belonged to Victoria, not as a guilt gift, but as a genuine blessing. "I want you to have this," Elizabeth had said to Angela. "Victoria believed that love creates more love, that opening your heart doesn't diminish what came before, but expands what's possible. I think she would want you to have something beautiful for your new home." As Angela and Bernard danced to the same song they'd chosen in the hospital chapel months earlier, they reflected on the journey that had brought them together. They'd survived medical crisis, corporate betrayal, family interference, and legal warfare. They'd proven their love could withstand any test. "Any regrets?" Bernard asked, echoing their wedding night question. "Only that it took a car accident to bring us together," Angela replied. But then again, maybe some things are worth waiting for. Looking around at their celebration, Carmen healthy and laughing, David proud and successful, Elizabeth finally at peace with their relationship, Angela realized they'd built something extraordinary. Not just a marriage, but a family. Not just love, but a legacy. The hardest battles were behind them. Now they could focus on the beautiful life ahead, built on a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. Chapter 8. New Beginnings. 8 months after their courtroom victory, Bernard and Angela had settled into married life with the joy of people who'd fought for their happiness and won. Carmen was in full remission. David had been promoted to senior associate at his law firm, and their charitable foundation was already funding medical research projects across the country. But their peace was threatened when a business crisis forced Bernard to make choices that would test their relationship in new ways. The FDA is blocking approval for our new cardiac device, Bernard announced, entering their penthouse after a brutal day of meetings. Apparently, someone's been feeding them false safety data, trying to torpedo our biggest product launch. Angela looked up from the foundation grant applications she'd been reviewing. Who would do that? My best guess? Medicorp Industries. They're launching a competing device next quarter, and our technology is significantly better. Bernard loosened his tie, looking exhausted. The FDA review could take 6 months to resolve, which would kill our launch window and cost us approximately $50 million in lost revenue. Can you fight it? I'm going to have to, Bernard said grimly. Which means the next few months are going to be intense. 18-hour days, constant travel, legal battles, media management. Everything I swore I'd never put you through again. Angela felt a familiar chill. She'd seen what Bernard's work obsession could do to his health and their relationship. But this was different. This was external sabotage threatening the company they'd built together. What do you need from me? She asked simply. Bernard's expression softened with love and gratitude. Your patience, your understanding, and maybe your help. You understand medical devices better than anyone on my staff, and you know the real-world applications better than any consultant. Over the following weeks, Angela found herself drawn deeper into Bernard's business world. She attended FDA meetings, reviewed technical specifications, and helped craft arguments about real-world medical benefits. Her nursing background proved invaluable in demonstrating how their device could save lives in ways competitors' products couldn't match. You're a natural at this, Bernard said one evening as they worked late in his study, surrounded by technical documents and legal briefs. Have you ever considered making this transition permanent? You mean leave nursing? Angela asked, surprised by the suggestion. I mean expand your role. Keep working at the foundation clinic, but also help run the business side. We make a good team, Angela, in everything. The idea was tempting but terrifying. Angela had built her identity around nursing, around caring for people directly. Moving into corporate leadership felt like betraying everything she'd worked for. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from Dr. Chen in Baltimore. Mrs. Ellison, I need to speak with you about your mother's latest scans. Dr. Chen's voice was carefully controlled. Could you come in tomorrow morning? Angela's blood turned cold. Carmen had been doing so well, her remission so complete, that they'd started believing the cancer was truly beaten. What kind of scans? Angela asked, her hand trembling as she gripped the phone. Routine follow-up imaging showed some concerning shadows. They could be nothing, but I want to run additional tests to be certain. The drive to Baltimore felt endless. Carmen met them at the hospital looking worried but trying to stay positive for her daughter's sake. I'm sure it's nothing, Carmen said as they waited for Dr. Chen. Just scar tissue or something normal. But Dr. Chen's expression when she entered the consultation room told a different story. I'm afraid the cancer has returned, she said gently. Small tumors in the liver and lungs. The good news is that we caught it very early, and the tumors are small. The challenging news is that this suggests the cancer is more aggressive than we initially thought. Angela felt the world tilt beneath her feet. After everything they'd been through, after the successful treatment and months of remission, the cancer was back. What are our options? Bernard asked immediately, his hand finding Angela's. Another round of the experimental treatment, but with modifications to address the new presentation. The success rate for second treatments is lower, about 30% chance of long-term remission. And the cost? Dr. Chen hesitated. Cost isn't a factor, Bernard said firmly. It's approximately 600,000 for the modified protocol, Dr. Chen continued. Insurance definitely won't cover it, since it's still experimental. Angela closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the numbers and the implications. $600,000 on top of the $400,000 Bernard had already spent. $1 million total to save her mother's life. We'll do whatever it takes, Bernard said without hesitation. Later that evening, as Carmen began preparation for her second round of treatment, Angela and Bernard walked through the hospital corridors where they'd first fallen in love. I can't ask you to spend another $600,000, Angela said quietly. You're not asking. I'm offering, Bernard replied. Angela, we have more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. If I can't use it to save the people we love, what's the point of having it? But what if the treatment doesn't work this time? What if we're just throwing money at an impossible situation? Bernard stopped walking and turned to face her. Then we'll have thrown money at hope. We'll have given your mother the best possible chance. And we'll have done everything we could with the resources we have. His words echoed something Angela's father had once told her. You can live with anything except regret for chances you didn't take. Okay, she said, leaning into his strength. We fight again. Carmen's second treatment was more difficult than the first. The modified protocol was aggressive, with severe side effects that left her weak and nauseated. Angela took leave from her foundation work to be with her mother full-time, while Bernard managed both the FDA crisis and the family medical emergency. I feel like I'm failing everyone, Angela confessed to Bernard one night after a particularly difficult day at the hospital. I can't help you with the business crisis. I can't make my mother feel better. I can't seem to do anything right. You're keeping our family together, Bernard said, pulling her into his arms. You're being the daughter your mother needs and the wife I rely on. That's not failing. That's heroic. 3 weeks into Carmen's treatment, Bernard received the news they'd been waiting for. The FDA had cleared their cardiac device for approval after finding evidence that Medicorp had indeed submitted false safety data to regulators. Medicorp faced federal investigation while Bernard's company prepared for their successful product launch. We won, Bernard announced, calling Angela from his office. FDA approval, Medicorp in trouble, and our device launches next month as planned. That's wonderful, Angela said, genuinely happy despite her exhaustion. There's more, Bernard continued. The FDA was so impressed with our safety protocols and real-world testing that they want to fast-track approval for 3 other devices in our pipeline. Angela, your input on the medical applications was crucial to this victory. But Angela's attention was divided. Through the hospital room window, she could see Dr. Chen approaching with test results that would determine her mother's future. Bernard, I have to go. Dr. Chen is here with Mom's latest scans. I'm on my way, Bernard said immediately. Dr. Chen's smile when she entered Carmen's room told them everything they needed to know before she spoke. The tumors are gone, she announced with obvious joy. Completely gone. Not shrunk, not reduced, eliminated. Mrs. Morris, you are officially in remission again. Carmen burst into tears of relief, while Angela felt her knees give out. Bernard arrived just in time to catch her as she collapsed with emotional exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude. It worked, Angela sobbed into his chest. She's going to be okay. We're all going to be okay, Bernard said, holding both the women he loved most in the world. 6 months later, Angela had made her decision about her professional future. She would split her time between direct patient care at their foundation clinic and strategic oversight of their charitable medical initiatives. It wasn't abandoning nursing, it was expanding her ability to help people on a larger scale. Co-founder and medical director of the Victoria Ashworth Foundation, Angela said, reading her new business cards. It has a nice ring to it. Co-founder and wife of Bernard Ellison, Bernard corrected, pulling her into his arms. That has an even better ring. Their life had found a sustainable rhythm, meaningful work, deep love, family health, and financial security used for good purposes. They'd proven that wealth could be a tool for healing rather than just accumulation, that business success could be measured in lives saved rather than just profits earned. "What's next for us?" Angela asked one evening as they sat on their terrace, watching the Chicago skyline glitter in the distance. "Everything," Bernard replied simply. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." But what came next would test them in ways they'd never imagined, a pregnancy that would bring both incredible joy and life-threatening danger, challenging everything they thought they knew about love, survival, and the price of happiness. Their greatest adventure was still ahead of them. Chapter 9: Wedding and New Life. 1 year after their hospital wedding, Bernard and Angela celebrated their first anniversary by renewing their vows at the Chicago Botanic Garden in a ceremony that was everything their impromptu marriage hadn't been: elegant, planned, and surrounded by everyone they loved. Carmen walked Angela down the aisle, radiant with health and glowing with pride in her daughter. David served as Bernard's best man, while Elizabeth Ashworth attended as an honored guest, having evolved from adversary to ally over the months of legal battles and personal growth. "A year ago, we promised to love each other through whatever storms might come," Bernard said during his renewal vows. "We had no idea how literally those storms would test us. But standing here today with your mother healthy and our future bright, I can promise you that every challenge only made me love you more." Angela's vows spoke of partnership, growth, and building a life that honored both their dreams while serving something larger than themselves. As they exchanged new rings, elegant platinum bands that replaced the simple ones from the hospital gift shop, their love felt deeper and more certain than ever. Their reception was held in the conservatory, surrounded by tropical blooms and the warmth of people who'd supported them through their darkest moments. Bernard's toast brought tears to every eye as he thanked their guests for believing in their love when others had tried to destroy it. But the evening's biggest surprise came during the dancing, when Angela pulled Bernard aside with news that would change everything. "I have an anniversary gift for you," she said, leading him to a quiet corner of the conservatory. "Angela, you already gave me a gift," Bernard protested, touching the vintage watch she'd given him that morning, her father's watch, restored and inscribed with their wedding date. "This is different," Angela said, her eyes sparkling with excitement and nerves. She handed him a small wrapped box. Bernard opened it to find a tiny pair of baby shoes and a folded piece of paper. When he unfolded it, he saw an ultrasound image dated the previous week. "You're pregnant," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. 8 weeks, Angela confirmed, watching his face cycle through shock, joy, and overwhelming emotion. "Due in June. Our baby's going to be a summer baby." Bernard swept Angela into his arms, spinning her around as their guests applauded, having figured out the reason for their sudden joy. When he set her down, there were tears streaming down his face. "I love you," he said, his hands already moving protectively to her still flat stomach. "I love both of you." The pregnancy progressed beautifully for the first 5 months. Angela glowed with health and happiness, working reduced hours at their foundation, while Bernard handled more of the business operations. They spent evenings preparing the nursery, reading parenting books, and marveling at ultrasound photos that showed their growing child. "Boy or girl?" Bernard asked during one of their nightly conversations, his hand resting on Angela's expanding belly. "As long as the baby's healthy, I don't care," Angela replied. "Although the way this little one moves, I have a feeling we're in for quite an adventure." "Active babies become active children," Bernard observed, feeling a particularly strong kick against his palm. "Our kid's going to keep us on our toes." Their foundation clinic was thriving, providing free healthcare to thousands of families while pioneering new approaches to community medicine. Angela's blend of nursing expertise and business acumen had proven invaluable in creating programs that actually worked for the people they served. "You were right about expanding my role," Angela told Bernard one evening as they reviewed grant applications together. "I love direct patient care, but being able to help people on this scale, it's incredible." "You're incredible," Bernard corrected, watching her organize funding for a new pediatric wing with the same dedication she'd once brought to individual patients. At 7 months pregnant, Angela began experiencing concerning symptoms during a busy day at the clinic. She initially dismissed them as normal pregnancy discomfort, back pain, occasional dizziness, mild swelling. But when she nearly fainted during a patient consultation, her colleague Dr. Martinez insisted on immediate evaluation. "Your blood pressure is elevated," Dr. Martinez said with concern, reviewing Angela's vital signs. "Not dangerously high yet, but concerning for someone in their 3rd trimester." "It's probably just stress," Angela said, trying to downplay her symptoms. "We've been working long hours and I haven't been sleeping well." "Maybe, but let's be safe. I want you to see your obstetrician today, not next week." Dr. Patricia Williams, the perinatologist overseeing Angela's pregnancy, took one look at her test results and ordered immediate hospitalization for monitoring. "Your blood pressure has spiked significantly, and your urine shows protein. Both signs of developing preeclampsia," Dr. Williams explained. "It's manageable if we catch it early, but it can become dangerous quickly." Bernard arrived at the hospital within the hour, his face tight with controlled fear. "How dangerous?" "Preeclampsia can progress to eclampsia, which involves seizures and can be life-threatening for both mother and baby," Dr. Williams said honestly. "The only cure is delivery, but at 32 weeks, early delivery carries its own risks." The next few days became a careful balancing act, monitoring Angela's condition while hoping to buy time for their baby's development. Bernard barely left her side, working from her hospital room while coordinating both business operations and medical care. "I'm scared," Angela admitted one evening as they watched the fetal monitor show their baby's steady heartbeat. "What if something happens to the baby? What if something happens to me?" "Nothing's going to happen," Bernard said firmly, though his eyes reflected her fear. "We have the best doctors, the best hospital, the best care money can buy. We're going to get through this together." But Angela's condition deteriorated rapidly over the next week. Her blood pressure continued climbing despite medication. Her liver enzymes became elevated, and she began experiencing severe headaches that indicated the preeclampsia was progressing to its most dangerous stage. "We need to deliver today, Doctor," Williams announced after reviewing Angela's latest test results. "Her condition is becoming critical, and waiting any longer puts both of them at serious risk." "But it's only 33 weeks, Angela protested weakly. "Is the baby ready?" "Babies born at 33 weeks have excellent survival rates with our NICU team," Dr. Williams assured her. and staying pregnant any longer might not be survivable for you." As Angela was prepared for surgery, she gripped Bernard's hand with desperate strength. "Promise me something," she whispered, her voice weak but urgent. "Anything," Bernard replied, bringing her hand to his lips. "Promise me that if something happens, if you have to choose, you'll choose the baby. Our child needs a father." "Nothing's going to happen," Bernard said fiercely. "You're both going to be fine. I refuse to accept any other outcome." "Bernard." "No," he interrupted, his voice breaking. "I've already lost one woman I loved to medical complications. I won't lose you, too. I can't survive losing you." "You will," Angela said with the strength that had first drawn him to her. "You'll love our child enough for both of us if you have to, but I'm going to fight with everything I have to come back to you." As Angela was wheeled into surgery, Bernard felt his world narrow to the waiting room, where he'd spent the most terrifying hours of his life. Carmen and David arrived within hours, providing support and distraction while the surgical team fought to save both the women and children he loved most. "She's the strongest person I know," David said, watching his brother-in-law pace the waiting room like a caged animal. "If anyone can get through this, it's Angela." "I can't lose her," Bernard said, his voice raw with exhaustion and terror. "She saved my life in every way possible. Without her, I'm nothing." At 3:47 a.m., after 5 hours of surgery, Dr. Williams finally emerged from the operating room. Her scrubs were stained with sweat and exhaustion, but her expression carried cautious relief. "How are they?" Bernard demanded, shooting to his feet. "Your wife is extraordinary," Dr. Williams said with genuine admiration. "She fought through complications that should have been insurmountable. And your baby—" She smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Ellison. You have a daughter. She's small but strong, breathing on her own and fighting like her mother." Bernard's legs nearly gave out with relief. "They're both okay?" "Angela's critical but stable. The next 24 hours will be crucial for her recovery. But the baby is doing remarkably well for 33 weeks. She's in the NICU for monitoring, but her vital signs are excellent." When Bernard was finally allowed into recovery, he found Angela pale but conscious, her eyes immediately seeking his face. "The baby," she whispered weakly. "Our daughter," Bernard said, tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect, small, but perfect." "A daughter," Angela smiled, tears mixing with exhaustion. "We have a daughter." A nurse wheeled in a tiny incubator, and Bernard's heart stopped at his first sight of his child. She was impossibly small but undeniably alive, her little chest rising and falling steadily, her tiny fingers curled into fists as if she were ready to fight the world. "Meet Emma," Angela said softly, having chosen the name weeks earlier. "Emma Victoria Ellison." Bernard reached through the incubator opening to touch his daughter's tiny hand, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness that rose in his chest. This perfect little being was part of him and Angela, a miracle born from their love and determination. "Thank you," he whispered to Angela, leaning down to kiss her forehead gently. "Thank you for fighting, for surviving, for giving me everything I ever dreamed of." "We did this together," Angela corrected weakly. "We're going to raise her together, love her together, show her how to be strong and brave and kind." As Bernard held vigil over his wife and daughter, watching Angela sleep while Emma's monitors beeped steadily, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They'd survived accidents, corporate betrayal, family interference, legal battles, and medical crises. Now they had a daughter who would carry their love into the future. The hardest night was over, but their greatest adventure, parenthood, was just beginning. Chapter 10, Miracle of Love. The emergency surgery began at 10:30 p.m. on a cold October night, with Bernard Ellison pacing the waiting room like a man possessed. Angela's preeclampsia had progressed to HELLP syndrome, a life-threatening condition that could kill both mother and baby within hours if not treated immediately. Carmen and David maintained vigil with him, but Bernard was consumed by terror that felt familiar and devastating. He'd lost Victoria to medical complications, and now he faced the possibility of losing Angela and their child to the same cruel randomness that had destroyed his first chance at happiness. "She's going to be fine," Carmen said quietly, watching her son-in-law struggle with demons that went far deeper than tonight's crisis. "Angela's been fighting since the day she was born. She's not giving up now." But Bernard could only think about the last words Angela had spoken before the anesthesia took her. "If something happens to me, promise you'll tell our baby how much I loved them." The surgery was complicated from the beginning. Dr. Williams had warned them that Angela's condition was critical. Her liver was failing, her blood pressure was dangerously high, and the baby was showing signs of distress. What should have been a routine emergency C-section became a fight for two lives. At midnight, a nurse emerged with grim news. "Doctor, Williams wants you to know that Mrs. Ellison's condition is more serious than we initially thought. We're doing everything we can, but the next few hours are critical." Bernard sank into a chair, his head in his hands as he prayed to any deity that might be listening. "I can't lose her," he whispered to David. "I barely survived losing Victoria, and that was when I thought I could protect myself by never loving anyone again. But Angela, she is my heart. Without her, I don't exist." "You won't lose her," David said firmly, though his own voice shook with fear. "Angela's too stubborn to die. She's got too much to live for." At 2 a.m., Dr. Williams emerged from surgery, looking exhausted and concerned. "Mr. Ellison, we've delivered your daughter, and she's doing well considering the circumstances. But Angela..." Bernard's world stopped. "What's wrong?" "Her blood pressure spiked dangerously during delivery, and we're struggling to control massive bleeding. We've had to call in additional specialists. The next hour is critical." "Can I see the baby?" Bernard asked, needing something to hold on to. Dr. Williams nodded, leading him to the NICU where a tiny figure lay in an incubator, surrounded by monitors and tubes but breathing steadily. She was impossibly small but perfect, with Angela's delicate features and what looked like it would be Bernard's dark hair. "She's beautiful," Bernard whispered, touching the incubator glass. "Fight for your mama, little one. She needs to wake up and meet you." He returned to the surgical waiting area, where the minutes crawled by like hours. At 3:30 a.m., another nurse emerged with news that made his blood run cold. "Mr. Ellison, we need you to be prepared. Mrs. Ellison has flatlined twice in the past hour. The team has managed to resuscitate her both times, but her condition is extremely critical." Bernard felt his world shatter. After everything they'd survived, after all the love they'd built, Angela was slipping away from him just as Victoria had. The irony was devastating. Both women he'd loved dying from medical complications, despite having access to the best care money could buy. "I need to tell her something," Bernard said desperately. "I need her to know—" "She can't hear you right now, sir," the nurse said gently. "But sometimes they say that loved ones can sense when family is near." Bernard was allowed into the OR observation area, where he could see the surgical team working frantically over Angela's still form. Machines beeped and whirred, monitors showed erratic patterns, and doctors moved with urgent precision around the woman who'd become his entire world. "Fight, my love," he whispered against the glass. "Come back to me. Come back to our daughter. We need you. I need you." At 4:15 a.m., the surgical activity suddenly intensified. Bernard watched in terror as more doctors rushed into the OR, their movements becoming even more urgent. Dr. Williams emerged 20 minutes later, her scrubs soaked with sweat and her face showing exhaustion mixed with something that looked like surprise. "Mr. Ellison," she began, and Bernard braced himself for the worst news of his life. "Your wife?" Dr. Williams paused, shaking her head as if she couldn't believe what she was about to say. "Your wife is remarkable. She fought through complications that should have been fatal. We lost her 3 times on that table, but she fought her way back each time." Bernard's legs nearly gave out. "She's alive?" "She's alive. Critical but stable. But Mr. Ellison, there's something else." Dr. Williams's expression shifted to wonder. "During the surgery, when we were trying to control the bleeding, we discovered something unexpected. Angela was carrying twins." "Twins?" Bernard's world tilted. "The second baby was perfectly positioned behind the first, which is why all our ultrasounds missed him. We've successfully delivered both children, a daughter and a son. They're small but incredibly strong, just like their mother." Bernard's knees gave out completely. David caught him as he collapsed, sobbing with relief so intense it felt like rebirth. After 5.5 hours of surgery, after watching Angela die and return to life 3 times, he had his wife and 2 children, a family he'd never dared dream possible. "Twins," he whispered through his tears. "We have twins. Your son and daughter are in the NICU, both breathing on their own and showing excellent vital signs for 33 weeks, Dr. Williams continued. "And Angela, she's asking for you." The recovery room was quiet except for the gentle sounds of medical equipment. Angela lay pale against white sheets, looking fragile but conscious, her brown eyes tracking to Bernard the moment he entered. "Hey," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "Hey yourself," Bernard replied, his voice breaking as he approached her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Angela admitted with a weak smile. "But alive. We're all alive." "We have twins," Bernard said, taking her hand carefully. "A daughter and a son." "Twins?" Angela's eyes widened with wonder. "How is that possible?" Dr. Williams said the boy was hiding behind his sister, perfect positioning that fooled every ultrasound. Bernard's voice was thick with emotion. "They're both beautiful, both strong, both fighting like their mother." Tears streamed down Angela's face. "I'm sorry I scared you. I know you've lost too much already." "You didn't lose anything," Bernard said fiercely, bringing her hand to his lips. "You gave me everything. You gave me our family, our future, our forever." 2 nurses wheeled in tiny incubators, and Bernard's breath caught at the sight of his children together. The daughter they'd already met lay peaceful in one incubator, while her brother, slightly smaller but equally perfect, slept in the other. Both had full heads of dark hair and the long fingers that suggested they'd inherited their father's height. "Meet Emma and James," Angela said softly, having chosen both names during their pregnancy planning. "Emma Victoria and James David." Bernard reached through both incubator openings to touch his children's tiny hands, overwhelmed by the fierce love that rose in his chest. Emma's fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength, while James opened his eyes, the same intense blue-gray as his father's, and seemed to focus on Bernard's face with startling awareness. "They're perfect," Bernard whispered. "Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Angela. Thank you for fighting, for surviving, for giving me them, for giving me everything." "We did this together," Angela corrected, watching her husband fall in love with their children. "We're going to raise them together, love them together, show them how to be strong and kind and brave." "I love you," Bernard said, leaning down to kiss Angela's forehead gently before touching each baby's tiny cheek. "I love all 3 of you more than life itself." 6 months later, the penthouse had been transformed from a sterile bachelor pad into a home filled with life, love, and the controlled chaos of twin infants. Baby equipment covered every surface. Photographs of Emma and James adorned every wall, and the sound of laughter echoed through rooms that had once known only business calls and solitary meals. Angela had recovered completely from her traumatic delivery, returning to part-time work at their foundation, while Bernard handled business operations around their children's schedules. They'd found the perfect balance: professional partnership, romantic love, and devoted parenthood, all woven together into something beautiful and sustainable. Their foundation was thriving, providing free healthcare to thousands of families while pioneering new approaches to community medicine. The Victoria Ashworth Foundation had become a model for other charitable organizations, proving that business success and social responsibility could work hand in hand. But their greatest success was the family they'd built together. "Are they finally asleep?" Angela asked as Bernard emerged from the nursery, looking exhausted but blissfully content after the nightly battle of getting two 6-month-old babies to settle down. "For now," Bernard replied, pulling Angela into his arms. Emma went down easily, but James fought like his mother, determined to stay awake and see what he was missing. Angela laughed, the sound that had first captured Bernard's heart still making his pulse race. "He gets that stubborn streak, honestly. Between your determination and my independence, these children are going to be a handful." "The best kind of handful," Bernard agreed, spinning Angela slowly around their living room in an impromptu dance to music only they could hear. They swayed together in the soft glow of Chicago's lights, baby monitors crackling softly with the sounds of their sleeping children. Angela rested her head against Bernard's chest, listening to the steady heartbeat that had become her favorite sound in the world. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't crashed that night?" Angela asked softly. "Never," Bernard replied immediately. "Because I can't imagine a life without you in it. You and our children are my whole world." "No regrets? Not even about the money we spend on charity instead of adding to your already obscene wealth?" Bernard's laugh was rich and warm. "The only thing I regret is waiting so long to understand what real wealth looks like." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. This woman who'd taught him that love was the greatest fortune of all. "What does real wealth look like?" Angela asked, though she already knew the answer. "This," Bernard said simply, his arms tightening around her. "You in my arms, our children sleeping safely in their cribs, a life built on love instead of ambition. This is everything I never knew I wanted, and everything I'll never stop being grateful for." As they continued their slow dance in the soft glow of city lights, both knew they'd found something rarer than success, more valuable than money, more lasting than fame. They'd found their forever in each other, and they planned to spend the rest of their lives proving that the greatest love stories aren't the ones that end with happily ever after. They're the ones that begin with it. Their love had survived every test, overcome every obstacle, and created something beautiful that would last for generations. Emma and James would grow up knowing that love could conquer fear, that family was worth fighting for, and that real strength came from vulnerability shared with the right person. This was just the beginning of their extraordinary forever, a billionaire and a nurse who'd found that the greatest wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts, but in moments like these, perfect and precious, and absolutely priceless.